Hi, it's Dan, and tonight I kind of wanted to share with you some of the thoughts that I've been having as we kind of embark into the time of scandal and how to heal from the crisis that's been affecting the Catholic Church and the different dioceses. And so I wanted to answer some of the questions that have been coming to me. It's been a recurrent theme in my practice, and I just want to make sure that I'm addressing this so that I can aid in the healing process in the diocese that I live in, and hopefully where you live, as many of us have been hurt by the things that have been coming out about the various members of clergy. So I want to be able to do that for you tonight and leave you with some key points to go and help rebuild the church.
Thank you. That's great. I guess one of the questions that I have is, what do we do with that fear and anger that's occurred since the scandals broke, that everyone's feeling, especially with McCarrick and all these growing fears at the church and all the various dioceses?
Yeah. Well, I think when anybody goes through like a traumatic thing, whether it's individually or publicly, I mean, people have this expectation of the church as an authority and people that are supposed to protect us, people that are supposed to help us, supposed to be beacons of light. And when they're not, our expectations are shattered. So anger and fear is a pretty normal human experience, you know. One of the big things, though, to remember about this, especially in lieu of the McCarrick, scandal that's occurred, I call this like the McCarrick effect. In psychology, we have what we call an availability heuristic. What that means is whatever, like, if I can conjure up a story about something, it makes me believe that there's a likelihood that this experience could happen to me, or it could occur or reoccur or is happening. So for instance, people hear about McCarrick and there are incredible details, horrific details, and it's not just his story, but any media outlet that's covering the horrible, egregious things that have happened in different dioceses. These details, as you hear them, they keep generating a powerful story that in many ways, starts to affect the way we think about our priests, think about our church, think about our own bishops, and in a lot of ways it starts to deaden the dialogue that's needed. Instead of actually, having conversations, having communication, and having things come to light and actually having an interaction, people are, getting involved in a narrative of trauma, a narrative of victimization. So they're almost being pulled into this, even if they were not the victims themselves, which is horrible. And so many people are angry. Many people feel betrayed, and and when we feel that way, when we are in a place of being a victim, we really only have oftentimes two ways we're going to behave. We're either going to go and we're going to try to attack the person, or find somebody that we can attack because we want to protect ourselves, or we're going to avoid everything. We're going to, it's like fight or flight. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to find somebody to fight. I'm going to find the bad guy, or I'm going to run away. And some people, may want to avoid this altogether, which I think is also dangerous when we're immersed in this. So those are both two ways that I think people are handling them, and again, they're not usually reflective of our best selves, and it doesn't do a whole lot for these victims, because if we participate in their victim narrative, it actually gets bigger, and it doesn't actually help to bring about the change that's needed. We need to actually make it so that people don't have this happen again, so that these people have a sense of relief.
So then how actually do we make that change happen? Because I understand that people are going to be upset. I mean, rightfully so. These are horrible things, like you said. But how do we actually make change?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the really important part, right? People want change. So like I said, the two common modes that people are operating in is, again, it's I'm going to find somebody and I'm going to get rid of them, or we're going to fight somebody. There's an enemy. Remember, if you're watching this, the enemy is not a man. And if you're a Catholic and you believe in the faith, you have to keep that in the forefront of your mind. We're not dealing with men. Obviously men did these horrible acts and people did these horrible acts. But when we're talking about, the Catholic Church, remember who the enemy is, and that we need to really figure out how to, stop looking directly at all of these things head on and making them black and white. Because change, people keep talking about change. Change isn't black and white. When change occurs, it happens in the gray, and that's super uncomfortable because it means that something new has to happen. For in my life, I studied the martial art of Aikido, and what that means is that when two forces come together, oftentimes it looks like this, boom. But essentially what we want to do is we have to provide what's missing. There is something that's missing when this trauma, this violence towards innocent people has occurred. We have to transform it into something else. And so in Aikido, the secret to peace is you have to provide what's missing. We have to form something new, which means that we actually have to form, relationships. Actually, like probably relationships, that needed to be happening before, before any of this happened. Because people keep asking, well, why did this happen? And if we're really honest about why this has occurred in the church, we have to be mindful of what the church is it's been Christ's vehicle, to transforming this world. And I had spoken with a priest earlier today, and I said, we're dealing with, at least in our diocese, 75 years of church history where things were hidden and abuses happened, and right now it's all coming to light. Some of these people have died. Some of these people that have done these things, supposedly done these things, they're dead. And one of the things about it is all of these priests, all of these bishops, who is praying for them? Go to Mass on Sunday. When do you hear people really, as a community, pray for their priests, pray for their bishops? It's not just one person who's fallen. It's a community. As Catholics, where has been our prayer for our priests and our bishops and our clergy? And again, people go bad. It is consequence of original sin, and it doesn't mean that this is okay at all. But when we talk about wanting to make change, we have to move into the places that we're afraid of. Remember, we can't just fight, because if you fight, then all of a sudden you run a lot of different risks. Just fighting to fight. And a lot of people have been quoting the saints. A lot of people have been quoting the saints. And I only struggle with that because you have to study the lives of the saints to quote them. Those men and women that went up against the church or confronted holy men and
like St. Catherine of Siena.
Like St. Catherine of Siena. Well, you can quote her, and she is a dynamic character, but she had a fire and a life spiritual. Aside from just saying these whiz-bang powerful things, she had a power and a relationship. If you have no relationship, there is no change. And that's the thing. If people have fear, there's not gonna be change because there won't be a relationship, just a relationship with fear. And fear is what created this, and fear is what will continue this until, as our Lord says, love conquers fear. We have to move into relationship, not avoid it, not repel people, because then we participate in a victim narrative. And it's terrible to feel like a victim. People are enraged. People that nothing happened to them directly. They're enraged. They hear these stories. And we have to be mindful that the better story seems to be the one that dominates. And we cannot have a story that is based out of fear, because then more fear, more pain, more aggression, more division. And so when people are trying to motivate change in their diocese or in their community, you got to look at the fruit of the efforts. If people are doing things and they're coming from a place of fear, what's going to occur is that the people are going to, it's going to be divisive. It's going to go nowhere. It's going to create more scandal, more division, more unrest. People are going to burn out. You got to watch the fruit. If the fruit of the action is not reflective of love and is not one of connection, because you think about Christ. Christ is a unifying principle. The relationship with Christ bonds people together. That's how we converted people as Catholics. We saw what was good in every culture that we went to, and then we brought that goodness into the Catholic faith. We are universal people. We study universal goodness because everything that's good points to God. We are defining ourselves by what we hate for decades and decades and decades. Bad things keep happening. So the answer to the question in many ways is we need relationship. Primarily, we need relationship with Christ. And then we need relationship with each other. One through love, not one through fear. And again, people that are moving and doing things that are not rooted in prayer. Please do not say that you're trying to be like Catherine of Siena. She was in love with Christ. That's what made her powerful. And she also loved the person she was, essentially pushing the buttons of. And that's why she said what she said, because she loved that person. Because she saw Christ in him. Not because she thought that they were the devil. And I think that that's kind of missing. There's too much fear.
So then practically we form relationships, you're saying, with each other, but what does that mean? Other laity or clergy, or what do you specifically mean by that?
Well, what I'm saying is, so instead of burying our head in the sand and pretending there's no scandal, everything's going to fix itself, everybody will work itself out, that's not a good idea, because that's avoiding and disconnecting, and that's silly. The second way of just looking for, lighting up a torch and getting a pitchfork and trying to just, get rid of whoever,
right, they're the two extremes.
That's dangerous. Yeah, those are really dangerous ways to go, most likely. So what I would say is the relationship needs to start at first, with the Eucharist, because that in many ways we are Catholic people, we are Eucharistic people, and if we are not really centered around the Eucharist, well then we start to go off in the wrong direction. So first thing is to have a relationship with God, and really to think about, well, where is it that God is really calling me to be? Because Christ didn't run anywhere. Christ didn't run anywhere and cause like mayhem. Obviously he converted people because he loved them. And if you're afraid of people, if you're afraid of the church, there's not going to be a relationship. So we need to first start with prayer and Eucharist. Now, if out of that comes action, well, it's going to be action that is, in line with a love for God. The other thing, I guess, is when I say relationships, is we want to form connections with clergy. We literally need to go move out, and we need to create new narratives. Remember I told you there was this availability heuristic, means that there's a story. And if we don't take action upon ourselves and say, I'm going to go meet with so-and-so, I'm going to have a dialogue with so-and-so, there is no new... Well, with the bishop, with whoever, because you need a new narrative. You need a new story to go to versus this guy is a bad guy, this is the crime boss, because they're not the enemy. I mean, they might be disordered, they might have made mistakes. What?
Who is the enemy?
The enemy is Satan.